Okay, now that we've learned how to make other corridors show up in our London Road model and our London Road cross sections, let's focus our attention on how we can target those other corridors using a tool called target aliasing. In this exercise, we're going to learn how to target other corridors and terrain. So by default, all end condition solutions typically target the existing active terrain model. So in this case right now, all my end conditions are targeting my existing ground terrain. So if you look on my cross section, here's my existing ground terrain, and all my end conditions tie into that existing ground terrain. But we do have the option or ability to also target other corridors and other terrains that are inside of the model or attached as reference files. We can do that using a tool called Define Target Aliasing, which gives us the ability to search for other corridors to target other than the active surface or the active terrain. So if we just use this as an example here where we're underneath the bridge, in this particular example, what we're going to do is instead of targeting the existing ground where these bridge walls are, we're actually going to target these bridge walls so that the grading goes up and hits these bridge walls instead of the existing ground. So I'm going to show you how to do that using the target aliasing tool. So to define a target alias or search for another target besides the existing ground, we're going to go up to corridors and locate the target aliasing tool. So here's define target aliasing, so we're going to select that. And then the first thing we want to do is locate our corridor. So let's go ahead and select our London Road corridor. And when we do that, the define target aliasing dialog comes up. And you can see the active target right now is the active surface or our active terrain model. So now what we want to be able to do is provide some options for how we want the end condition solution to solve to other corridors. So right now we're solving to the existing ground in all locations because we haven't provided any other targets for it to search for. So what we want to do is we want to target our abutment walls. If the abutment walls exist, then the end conditions will try to find a solution and intersect and solve to those walls. So I'm going to do the rear abutment wall first, so we'll add that as a corridor reference, and we can just do that by selecting it graphically in the plan view. And I'm going to select the head abutment by graphically selecting that corridor from the plan view. And then for the existing ground, I'll just go and select the existing ground terrain model in the plan view. Okay, so that adds those items to our list of aliases over here, or targets, if you will. And what's going to happen is the corridor now will, instead of going to try and solve to existing ground, it's going to see if it can find a solution first by looking at the rear abutment corridor. And then if the rear abutment corridor exists, it will go and hit that rear abutment. If the head abutment wall exists, which is this one over here, it'll go and target that and find a solution for that wall if one exists. And then if neither one of those exists, then it's just going to go back and default to the existing ground terrain. So let's see if we can make this work. So let's go to hit apply. It's going to do some processing, and then we can close. And now you're going to notice that our slopes now, instead of stopping at existing ground, they now tie into our abutment walls from our abutment model that we had attached. So this is very useful for when you need to target other items other than your existing ground terrain. So let's review the order of processing of the target aliasing because I want to make sure you understand that. So let me go back to the target aliasing tool and select my corridor again. So it's very important to realize that the order of the processing is always going to go from top to bottom. So as the cross section goes through, or as the template goes through and searches for a target, it's always going to start from the top. So if it finds this particular corridor, then it will solve to that. If it doesn't find it, it'll go to the next one in the list and then work its way down until it finds a target. So I just want you to be aware of that. There's also a use closest button here where if it finds a surface that's closer, it'll use the closest option first. Also be aware that when use closest is toggled on, it will ignore the order of the aliases, and it's going to seek the closest alias that satisfies the solution. So I just want to make you aware of that when you're using the target aliasing tool.